Hi, I'm Emily Carter, and my family loved using me as their scapegoat. Every gathering turned into a chance to compare me to my sister, the so-called perfect one. But the night my father called me selfish at the dinner table, I finally answered back, and the silence that followed was louder than every insult I'd endured. Before we dive into this, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. The scent of roasted chicken and my mother's overpowering perfume filled the dining room. It was my father's birthday, and like every family occasion, the room was packed with relatives who saved their best smiles and sharpest words for these events. The table was a battlefield of passive aggression, laid out with fine china and silver cutlery. I sat quietly, pushing a single green bean around my plate, trying to become invisible. My father, Mark, stood up, his wineglass held high. He had a way of commanding a room, his voice booming with a confidence he never earned. He beamed at my older sister Lauren, who sat opposite me, soaking in the attention like a flower in the sun. "I want to make a toast," he began, his eyes twinkling. "To my daughter, Lauren. She just organized a fundraiser for the local animal shelter. She spent weeks on it, all on her own time. She is the most generous, selfless person I know. Always thinking of others." A chorus of "hear, hear," and murmurs of agreement went around the table. My Aunt Carol nodded enthusiastically. My mother dabbed her eye with a napkin, looking at Lauren with pure adoration. Lauren gave a modest, practiced smile. "Oh, Dad, it was nothing." My father wasn't finished. His eyes scanned the table and landed on me. The warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by a familiar, dismissive smirk. "It's a wonderful thing," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "to have a daughter who gives back." He paused for effect, making sure everyone was watching me. "Not like you," he said, pointing his glass in my direction. "Selfish, always thinking only of yourself." The words hung in the air for a second before the table erupted in a wave of uncomfortable, sycophantic laughter. It wasn't loud, roaring laughter. It was the quiet, nervous kind that signaled agreement without wanting to seem too cruel. It was the sound of people who were just glad the target wasn't them. My face burned, a hot, prickling shame that crawled up my neck. I stared down at my plate, the pattern on the china suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. This was nothing new. This was the story of my life, a script they had all memorized. I was the selfish one. Lauren was the saint. The roles had been assigned when we were children, and no amount of evidence to the contrary ever mattered. I remember being 8 years old and winning the school science fair. I had spent months building a model volcano that actually erupted with baking soda and vinegar. I came home with a big blue ribbon, my chest puffed out with pride. I ran into the living room and showed my parents. My father glanced up from his newspaper. "That's nice, Emily. Don't get the carpet dirty." That same week, Lauren drew a picture of a lopsided house with a stick figure family. My mother framed it and hung it in the hallway. "Look, Mark," she'd said, her voice full of wonder. "She's a real artist. So creative." When I was in high school, I worked a part-time job at a grocery store to save for college. Every weekend, while Lauren was at cheerleading practice, or going to parties, I was bagging groceries and mopping floors. I never complained. I was proud of the calluses on my hands. I applied for every scholarship I could find, and through sheer hard work, I got enough to cover my tuition at the state university. I wouldn't be a financial burden on them. I remember telling them the news at dinner, my acceptance letter clutched in my hand. "I got a full scholarship," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. My mother sighed. "Well, you were always lucky, Emily. I just hope you can handle the pressure." My father grunted. "Don't expect us to send you money for extras. You wanted this? You can pay for it." 2 years later, Lauren got into a private arts college with a high price tag. They took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for it. They threw her a huge going away to college party. No one mentioned that I was already halfway through my degree, paying my own way, and sending money home whenever I could to help with the bills. That money was never acknowledged. It was just expected, like rent from a tenant. When I sent them $500 after a particularly good month of tips at the restaurant where I worked, my mother's only comment on the phone was, "It's a start, I suppose. Your sister is volunteering at a soup kitchen, you know. She gives her time. That's more valuable than money." The comparisons were endless, woven into the fabric of our family. Lauren was praised for her beauty. I was told I should try to smile more. Lauren was commended for her kindness. I was criticized for being too quiet, which they interpreted as being aloof and judgmental. Everything I did was wrong, and everything she did was right. I was the dark cloud, and she was the ray of sunshine. Over the years, I learned that the easiest way to survive was to stay silent, to just nod, endure the comments, and wait for the day to be over. Back at the dinner table, the assault continued. My father's comment had opened the floodgates. "He's right, you know," my Aunt Carol piped up, looking at my mother for approval. "Lauren always calls me on my birthday. She never forgets." She conveniently ignored the fact that I had driven her to 3 different doctor's appointments last month because she was afraid to go alone. My uncle Robert chimed in. "And that charity launch of hers was brilliant. She has a real heart for people, a natural giver." My mother let out a long, theatrical sigh and shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on me with profound disappointment. She didn't need to say a word. Her expression said it all. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Lauren just sat there, basking in the praise. She shot me a quick look, not of sympathy, but of pity, tinged with a smug satisfaction. It was the look of a winner. It was the look she'd been giving me our entire lives. My appetite was gone. The food in my mouth tasted like cardboard. I placed my fork and knife down on my plate, the clatter sounding unnaturally loud in my own ears. I clenched my fists in my lap, my nails digging into my palms. I could feel the eyes of 12 relatives on me, all of them silently agreeing with my father. I was the family disappointment, the selfish daughter, the broken cog in their perfect machine. And in their minds, I deserved every bit of this public shaming. The laughter, though quiet, felt like a physical blow. It echoed in my ears, mixing with the memories of 1,000 other small cuts and public humiliations. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the feeling of my throat closing up. For 29 years, I had swallowed my anger. I had choked down my hurt. I had absorbed their judgment because I thought that's what a daughter was supposed to do. I believed, on some level, that if I just kept quiet and tried harder, one day they would finally see me. But sitting there, listening to them tear me down while celebrating a version of my sister that was only half true, I realized something. My silence wasn't earning me their love. It wasn't protecting me. My silence was giving them permission. It was a green light for them to continue. It told them that their words had no effect, that their opinions were fact, and that I agreed with their assessment of me. A strange calm washed over me. The knot of anxiety in my stomach didn't disappear, but it hardened into something else. It turned into resolve. The dam of years of suppressed pain and anger didn't burst, but a single clean crack appeared in it. Through that crack, a quiet, clear thought emerged. Not anymore. Tonight, I would not be their scapegoat. Tonight, the script was going to change. What none of them knew, what none of them had ever bothered to ask, was what I did when I wasn't in their line of fire. They saw me as the one who just takes, but the truth was, I was the one holding half of them together from the shadows. Last year, my Aunt May, not Aunt Carol, had called me in a panic. She had a medical emergency and no insurance. The hospital? Bills were piling up, and collectors were calling her day and night. She was terrified. I didn't tell her not to worry. I didn't offer empty words. I went to my bank, took out a significant portion of my savings, money I had been setting aside for a down payment on a small condo, and paid the bills for her. I funneled it through a third-party service so it would look like an anonymous donation from a charity. When she called me, crying with relief, I told her I was just glad she was okay. I never mentioned the money. 6 months ago, my cousin, Daniel, was about to drop out of college. He was working 2 jobs but couldn't cover his final year's tuition. He was one of the few people in the family who had always been kind to me. He never participated in the comparisons. I called him and told him I had some money from a wise investment. and wanted to loan it to him, interest-free. "Pay me back when you're a big-shot architect," I'd joked, knowing he probably never could. He didn't know I had sold my car and had been taking the bus to work ever since. And then, there was the biggest secret of all. Last spring, my father was laid off from his job. He was too proud to tell anyone, but my mother called me, weeping. They had missed 2 mortgage payments, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. The house they were all sitting in right now, the house where I was deemed selfish and ungrateful, was nearly lost. I took the rest of my condo savings and made the payments. I did it through my lawyer to ensure it remained anonymous. My parents thought the bank had made a clerical error and granted them a temporary reprieve. They never asked any questions. It was easier to believe in a miracle than to believe in me. And Lauren's charity launch? The one my uncle was just praising? I funded it. She came to me a few months ago, full of big ideas but with no capital. She'd spun a story about needing a small loan. I knew I'd never see the money again, but I gave it to her. I transferred $5,000 to her account. She told everyone the money came from private donors. I never did these things for praise. I did them because they were my family, and I thought that's what family did. You helped. You didn't. Keep score. But sitting at that table, I realized they had been keeping score all along, and all my points were on the wrong side of the ledger. The laughter died down, but the smirks remained. My father was still looking at me, waiting for me to shrink, to apologize, to be the person he expected me to be. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. I placed the glass down on the table with a soft click. Then I looked directly at my father. My voice, when it came out, was steady. It was unnervingly calm. "Since you're so sure I'm selfish," I said, my words cutting through the low chatter. "Let's clear something up." The room went quiet. All eyes were on me. This was new territory. I never spoke back. I held my father's gaze. Who paid Aunt May's hospital bills when she was about to lose her house? I didn't wait for an answer. I shifted my eyes to my parents. Who kept this house from foreclosure last spring when you were 2 months behind on the mortgage? Finally, I looked at my sister, whose perfect smile was beginning to falter. "And Lauren," I said, my voice as gentle as steel, "who funded your charity launch?" The room didn't just go quiet. The air itself seemed to freeze. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick dining room carpet. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by a dense, heavy shock. Lauren's face went completely white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. My father's smirk vanished. His jaw went slack, his eyes widening in confusion and disbelief. He looked from me to Lauren, then to my mother, searching for an explanation. My mother gasped, a sharp, audible intake of breath. She put a hand to her chest. "What are you talking about, Emily?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer her. Instead, I reached for the simple manila folder I had placed beside my purse on the floor. I had brought it tonight, not with the intention of using it, but as a sort of security blanket. A reminder to myself that I knew the truth, even if they didn't. I placed the folder on the table and calmly slid it across the polished wood until it stopped in the center. Right next to the floral arrangement, inside were the receipts, the bank statements, the transfer confirmations, the legal notice from the bank regarding the house, the proof of everything I had just said. I let my gaze travel around the table, meeting the eyes of each person who had laughed just moments before. "Selfish people," I said, my voice still even and measured. "Don't stay quiet while paying everyone else's debts. Selfish people send out a press release. They want a trophy." I looked at my Aunt Carol. Selfish people don't drive their aunts to chemotherapy and sit with them for hours, holding their hand, and never mention it to anyone. I looked at my cousin Daniel's parents. Selfish people don't sell their car to help their cousin finish his education. My eyes finally settled on my parents. And selfish people most certainly don't get mocked by their own family for being takers while they are secretly carrying their financial burdens. I let the words sink in. No one dared to speak. No one moved. They were trapped, forced to confront a reality that shattered the comfortable narrative they had built for decades. The the good daughter and the bad daughter, the saint and the sinner. It was all a lie, and they were the ones who had written the fiction. My father finally found his voice, but it was not the booming, confident sound it had been before. It was thin, weak, and cracked. You could have told us," he stammered, trying to deflect the shame, to shift the blame back onto me one last time. It was a pathetic attempt, and we all knew it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I looked at him, and then I looked around the entire table, at all of their stunned, guilty faces. "Why would I?" I replied, my voice softening not with weakness, but with a profound and final sadness. "I didn't do any of it for a thank you. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I didn't need to prove myself to you." I took a deep breath. "But tonight, I refuse to be your scapegoat anymore." The silence that followed was completely different from the one before. It wasn't the silence of shock. It was the crushing, deafening silence of shame. It was the sound of an entire family having to look at themselves in a mirror they never knew was there. In that moment, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. With nothing left to say, I slowly pushed my chair back from the table. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the stillness. I stood up, picked up my purse, and left the folder lying in the middle of the table, a monument to the truth. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway filled with pictures of Lauren's achievements, and out the front door into the cool night air. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. For the first time in my life, I felt light, the immense weight of their judgment, a burden I had carried since I was a child, was gone. I had left it in that silent room, on their dinner table, for them to carry. Later that night, sitting in the quiet of my own small apartment, a space I had earned and paid for myself, I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I saw a woman who was tired but not broken, a woman who had finally found her voice. I whispered to the reflection, a promise to myself. They wanted me small. Instead, I gave them truth. If you've ever been belittled or compared unfairly, remember, your silence isn't weakness, and your truth can change everything. Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories where betrayal is silenced by justice.